taking a bit of a break, about 12 days or something like that, where I was feeling mix of feelings, not feeling inspired to do this. But I think it really was about kind of completing something and then wanting to shift gears. And I anticipated this and even observed myself within the previous videos moving through different intentions, just organically, naturally feeling different intentions. My initial intention was really just as a tool for self-assessment, self-awareness, being able to create this tension, knowing that I was going to publish the videos and that there would be potentially other people watching them, which puts some pressure on. It puts this kind of spotlight and this demand on myself to bring my best forward. And I don't mean best in a performative way, but most aligned with the intention that I had set, which was to essentially do public shadow work. And well, initially it was to let off some pressure of expressing myself, knowing that part of that would be initially things that are uncomfortable, difficult, things I'm challenged by, things I'm suffering with. I knew that those would come out first and that they would need to be exposed before more elevated, more appealing, more aesthetic things or more refined things could be shared. It came out of an observation that I was using somebody else as a sounding board, as a sort of canvas, a muse almost, but really without their consent. And actually they let me know that they didn't have the space to receive all of that. And so upon reflection, I realized I need a regular outlet, and not to look to other individuals to meet that need for myself. And as I've said previously, I'm a very creative person in that I'm constantly thinking about and inspired by the world and coming up with ideas, whether they be just kind of purely emotional, sensory kind of things, or intellectual things more on the intellectual spectrum. But I feel that artistry can be presented in many, many ways. And it's really about inventiveness. And it's about taking previous elements or things that we find inspiring and blending them together and creating something new. So something else that I've been doing recently is working on my vehicle, which is a camper van, and it's an old one. And so there's many things it could use improving on it. It's old and rusty, and lots of things could be improved upon. And I've been doing that over numerous years. And I actually find it very to be quite creative, because I'm not especially skilled in doing any of that stuff. So I'm kind of inventing it as I go. I'm trying out things that probably somebody that knew better wouldn't do. And so it's just this kind of, I mean, I'm reading some things and watching some videos and getting some advice, but in many ways I'm just using intuition, and I'm just using my intellect to come up with creative ways of solving my problems. And every artist will, do that as well. Take many things from other people. They're using paint that somebody else has created, or tools, or paper, or whatever. It's this recombining of things in your own way, in a way that you feel called to, inspired to in the moment. And I think this is a very powerful capability that humans have, is to be inventive and to be inspired by problems, as well as kind of intangible things, inspired by things that are difficult to put words to. And obviously this is what, not obviously, but this is the right brain, non-logical, somewhat irrational approach to reality. We could also consider it to be the feminine or the yin aspect of ourselves, the intuitive. And anyways, I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at here, but the previous intention that I had was really a creative response to what I had observed in my own self that wasn't working well. So I think it was quite a good idea. And I found it quite interesting in reviewing my videos to edit them and seeing myself, and in many cases being kind of in awe, as if it's somebody that I don't even recognize, or not that I don't recognize, but a different person. Just observing myself from the outside instead of from the inside. And it, I think it's quite a strange thing. And a new thing. Obviously, this is very new for humanity to be able to do that. I mean, there was a time we didn't even have mirrors. Maybe we only saw ourselves looking in a puddle or something. Now we're able to use these things to self-reflect, and I think video is a very interesting tool for self-reflection. However, I feel the desire to now move kind of to the next stage of that, where I've taken the time to self-reflect, to listen to my own kind of spontaneous creative flow, and I still want to retain that, because I think that's important. For me, it's important that art be spontaneous, that when it gets too manufactured and too contrived, then it loses some of its most important attribute, which is that spirit, is that really innovative, creative impulse. And we may judge the product of that as being awkward or strange or weird or imperfect, but I think that's just because it's not playing by the rules of the world. It's not trying to conform itself to the world. Obviously, there's a lot of effort that's going into conform to the degree to make it available, right? Putting it into the English language, for example. It's got to conform, or else it's got to conform to some degree. Otherwise, it can't be conveyed. So there's lots of elements of conformity to it. I won't go into that all now, dissecting it, but if we think about something like poetry, where the way it's presented, it might seem irrational or crazy or illogical, but poetry provides spaciousness that allows interpretation. So it allows even us to listen for our own spirit, our own unique interpretation. So in that imperfection, there is actually a doorway to what actually could be more perfect than what already exists. That's kind of abstract, but that's what I'm pointing at, is the abstract. And artists are always trying to get a hold of that essence that is abstract and bring it into form. And good art reflects that to us. Good art makes us wonder and stretches us. And I think that it both draws us in and expands us or challenges us as well. And that's very subtle and nuanced, and each person is going to find different art appealing. But the art that I want to offer, or kind of the role that I want to step into as a creative person, which, as I said, I have been my whole life, and often frustrated because I'm able to tune into these kind of abstract things and these subtle things, and I see the world in a unique way. I know I do. But the challenge has been how to bring it into the world, and what's interesting to me. What is the message that resonates in me, or messages? Because there's a lot. I'm inspired by many things, and some of it is out of pain, and some of it is out of pleasure, and then the subtleties on that kind of infinite spectrum. I'm a very intellectual person. I do want to dissect things, and I do want to analyze things. But there's also this other part that wants to see things in a bigger, cohesive way. So I like to kind of straddle two worlds, and that's what I think artists do. As I'm saying, I want to kind of evolve what I'm doing with video, and it will be a little more contrived, where I'm having intention for each video and thinking more about the audience. So taking the time to reflect within myself, what is something that's important to me, what am I inspired by, and crafting something. Yet I still want to retain the spontaneity of it. So essentially writing down some notes or bullet points and then going from there and just kind of shooting from the hip, as they say. I think it's good practice in presenting ideas, and also just being in that flow state, because that again is something that is interesting to me, is being in this slightly altered state that allows an expanded state of awareness. So I was trained as a hypnotherapist, went through almost a year long of training where we studied theoretically as well as practically the different brain waves and the different states of consciousness that actually can be measured as different frequencies. And the brain can produce different frequencies in different parts, but and it can be fragmented in that, or it can come into a coherent pattern, essentially, where the whole brain is essentially doing the same thing. And I think this is the difference between being scattered and being focused. And I can tell you from years and years of meditation practice that focus is what we want. Focus is a state that feels really good. It doesn't feel good to be scattered, right? This is a kind of mental laziness which could even be diagnosed as ADHD. I'm not sure that that's a valid thing as far as a rigid condition that people are stuck in or born with or anything like that. I myself was diagnosed having ADHD when I was, I think, 14. I think that somewhere around there. Given medication that I believe was a gateway drug for then trying other drugs. And it's a very powerful drug, and I think that it's very, very bad idea to give that to somebody with a developing brain, growing. And also it's very lazy to just say, oh, take this pill, you've got a chemical imbalance. Fortunately, I picked up the practice of meditation at an early age, at about 19. And I learned through my own experience to monitor my own mind, whether it was scattered or whether it was focused, because meditation is a practice of focusing. And there's all different types of meditation, but so that's what the focus is what is the characteristic of that meditation. So whether it's focus is, what I first learned was transcendental meditation. So it's focus on a mantra, something quite intangible, a sound that your ears are not hearing, but your mind is hearing. And you put your focus on that. And that transcendental practice is very different than an embodied meditation practice, such as focus on the breath, or in Taoist meditation, focus on the energy center in the belly, the lower dantian. Well, there's different elements, but essentially focusing in the body. And there's a number of meditation practices, such as Vipassana and Kundalini yoga, a lot of Hindu meditation practices that are about the body, focusing in the body, on the chakras, on the breath. And so focusing in the body has a very different result and characteristic than focusing on something such as a mantra or a deity. Anyways, the practice of meditation is a practice of focus. And it's like developing a muscle. There's the self-awareness of what is my mind doing right now? And what do I want to be doing with my mind? And can I get it to go there? So this ability to get the mind to focus and stay there is meditation and is mental discipline. And in that focused state, there's a deepening. If you stay in that focused state, your brain waves will start to change. They'll start to deepen and slow down. And the experience is a relaxing and a feeling of expansion, where you see things from a bigger perspective. And it's very difficult to explain. You have to essentially experience it. But that's where I want to speak from, because I know that is a wiser place. You have more awareness. And that's where I want to speak from. I want to speak from an expanded state of awareness. It's tricky to be focused on doing something out in the world here and also be maintaining that state. There's varying degrees of this altered state of consciousness that we will dip in and out of, just as even when we're sleeping, those brain waves. So normally we might experience these deeper states of consciousness, alpha brainwaves, theta brainwaves, delta brainwaves, when we're asleep. Even when we're sleeping, there is a fluctuating where we come to a more surface alpha. Beta is the regular waking state, but slightly deeper and more expansive is alpha. Theta is deeper, slower, and more expansive. And then delta is very slow and very expansive. And only practiced meditators could be awake, essentially aware of the outside world, the world of the body, the world, while in theta. Theta is very deep and is associated with psychic abilities. Alpha too, but alpha is a state that people experience while awake when they're doing things like art, music, dance, sports, and it can be considered the flow state. That's what some people call it, where there starts to be some interesting effects in the experience of reality. So of time slowing down, colors being more vivid, a more sensual kind of experience of reality. And I believe that's because as we deepen and slow down these brain waves, we are tapping in more to other senses, senses beyond the five senses. It's really an awakening, an expanding into our larger self. We have this non-physical part of ourselves that is interpenetrating everything. And our focus in beta waking state is just on the physical, the tangible, the things we can touch and see and hear. But there's far more than that. There's far, far more than that. And deepening our state of consciousness, slowing those frequencies, those brainwave frequencies down, we start to expand our awareness into that larger self. And this is something that takes practice, but the benefit and the results can be noticed with even just a small amount of practice. And this is something that I repeat a lot. I remind myself and I tell other people if I'm doing any kind of coaching or in any kind of therapeutic session, is that noticing creates a kind of biofeedback, and it enhances the state. It enhances our neural pathway retrainment, which is something that we want to do when we're wanting to change, right? We are our neural pathways. We are these grooves and patterns that are repeated, and those become our default. However, when we expand our awareness, when we deepen our state of consciousness, we can rewrite these things. We can modify these neural pathways, and we can develop new habits, new traits, new behaviors, and erase or revise the ones that are not beneficial. And it actually happens quite effortlessly. It can happen quite effortlessly when we're using expanded states of consciousness. And that's a little bit of a tangent and quite deep topic, as far as that it's really just the immersion into the deeper levels of the unified field of consciousness that we access healthier states. And that if we do that regularly, we can really evolve and heal our default patterns. And what I mean by that is essentially habit. It doesn't mean, I'm not meaning something that we were born with, because we get scars from trauma. We get aversions and close down and shut off, and that becomes our default of being fearful, of being resistant or closed down. We lose a lot of things of our childhood innocence. So we learn bad things or dysfunctional things. But practicing the use of the muscle of focus, of concentration, and using it like this, almost like a magnifying glass and the heat that's created to drill down into a deeper layer of consciousness where we have access to wisdom. And this is how hypnotherapy works, where in a light trance or a deeper state of awareness, the therapist can remind the client of their inner wisdom. So the client may have a problem, maybe it's an abreaction, which means a reaction to something that is inappropriate or dysfunctional. And the hypnotherapist, while the client is in this wiser, expanded state, can ask the client to revisit the time when they made that new assessment of reality and to look at it from a broader perspective. So it's easy for a child to get an erroneous idea in their head about something. Something got broken, somebody yelled at them, now they think they're a bad person. Right? That happens to all children, I'm sure, in varying degrees. Some very horrific extreme examples. But as children, we're very sensitive, and also we look at authorities as knowing what is, right? Especially when those authorities come across that way, by suggesting that they are God. Anyways, this is the power of the mind that goes unutilized, because you don't need to go to a hypnotherapist to learn how to use your own mind. Meditation is an incredible practice that will teach you about yourself and the capacity of your mind. Sure, learn some techniques. They're basic. Meditation techniques are simple by design. And it just comes down to doing it. But in the noticing, as I'm coming back to here, in the noticing is what makes that repattern. So the observation of the traits of meditation, or the effects rather, are what really anchor it in. So, to be clear, if somebody takes 10 minutes to just sit in a quiet place, eventually it doesn't need to be quiet, but in the beginning it's useful for it to be quiet. And they just do whatever technique, whether that is counting their breaths or just observing their breaths, or using a mantra, or any meditation technique. You can also use eye fixation. This is what candle gazing is, or just looking at something. I have used the iris of this camera. So eye fixation is a focusing where you use a single point and you glue your attention to it. And you just focus and keep your eyes focused. And eventually what will happen is you start to notice your peripheral vision will change. It might suddenly seem to be brighter or fuzzy. And what's happening is that fixation where you're getting this kind of tunnel vision as far as your eyes go, and there's a change in the brain waves. So even I notice that as I'm doing it, finding the right words becomes a little more difficult. And that is because other non-linear parts of the brain are coming online. So there's a slowing down, and there's this engagement of a part of the mind that is not so linear, not so rational and logical. And so there's a bending of the rules and a looking at things outside of the box, which then makes it more difficult to play within the rules of language. So it is in doing this, where I'm sitting in front of a camera and I'm wanting the viewer to be able to understand me, it is challenging. It's like having a foot in two worlds and bridging that. And I think this is, again, the role of artists, mystics, shamans, wizards and witches, well, I think probably any profession, but those that I listed, that's the singular focus, is being bridgers of two worlds. And that's definitely what I want to do. I feel I do it naturally. I've always kind of dwelt in two worlds. And I've stumbled along the path on my own because I didn't grow up in any kind of tradition that spoke about it. There's nobody around me that helped me understand what being a natural mystic was about. And also, my whole growing up was without the internet. So I didn't have a lot of, it would only be books that I found, which I did find books, and I did read books. But, for example, ADHD, right? Diagnosed with this thing, which I think was really more a trait, well, that's kind of a whole nother conversation, but basically, being traumatized for not fitting into the mold, and then further disassociating as an abreaction from the trauma of it, from being punished, being singled out, by being ridiculed for being different and not behaving the way that the system wanted. Personally, I think this is a strength, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. Something else that I want to discuss in future videos is this strange idea of queerness as an identity. Because even though those traits, that there may be a truthfulness to it, that there are some people that are in varying degrees strange and queer, that's on such a spectrum that to draw an arbitrary line where there's the queer people and the not queer people is stupidity. It's the problem with academia that wants to delineate things and diagnose things and pathologize things, put things in little boxes ultimately for control. And this is something that I think we should resist and call out and point out as being erroneous and harmful, not useful at all. We need to be able to look at reality in a nuanced way, understanding that every person is unique and interpreting reality subjectively. So there's many ways that we can address this and even develop systems around that. For example, communication styles. Educating people to communicate in ways where there's a clarity and an empowerment and an ownership of one's experience, recognizing that it's not the colloquial or it's not the empirical reality, but its subjective reality carries weight. And that weight is something to be considered primarily in relationships. So if there is no relationship between two people that is consensual, then the relevance of the subjective experience of the parties loses its validity. So somebody coming up to me that I don't know, who's projecting their subjective reality onto me, I have no moral imperative to recognize that. They're going to have to sell me on that idea. They're going to have to bring all of their empirical evidence or evidence that is consensus-based, or if it's not, then a logic, which inevitably is going to be consensus-based, if I am going to be able to connect with it, right? Selling me something through some kind of logic. If they know me to some degree, they may be able to appeal to my subjective reality. But the onus is on people. If I want to sell you an idea, if I want to convey an idea, and I want to bring you on board, I want you to engage with that idea and consider it having value, the onus is on me. It can be the most wild thing, right? It can be purely subjective based on my own lived experience, my own story, this conclusion that I've come to through my life. And it is natural. It is natural that I be inspired to share these things. This is, again, writers, artists, inventors even, have to sell their ideas, have to explain themselves, how it is that can make sense for somebody else. And so again, this is the job of channeling things from one world to another, is is finding a logic, building a bridge that didn't exist before. So it seems like in today's world we've got a lot of ideologies and a lot of proponents of virtuous concepts that are being pushed onto people. And when there's resistance, there's more push. There's gaslighting. There's demonization. There's this horrific approach to people with different ideas, and this is archaic. We might as well be back to witch burning. That's what it feels like. It feels like people are either they're possessed by a very low function, fearful tactic of the mind. They're not tapping into a nuanced, subtle, expansive consciousness. And this is what I would like to bring and present, is the importance of this, how we do it, and how I would approach each of these topics. I mean, there's many, many topics. I have my ones that are of interest because they are based on life experience. For example, gayness and gender ideology, all that whole chestnut. I have a lot to say about that, and I see angles and aspects that I almost never hear talked about, very rarely. So, yeah, so my desire is to move now into this place of presentation of things, presentation, and thinking more about the viewer and what I want to offer them, what I want to share with the world as an artist, as a creator, as a mystic, as an intuitive and a intellectual as well. And this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but the healing part of it, or the wounded part of it, was really holding me back. So I think that moving forward, it still will be the shadow work, which I think every artist, that's actually what gives them a lot of power and a lot of creativity, is their willingness to face the uncomfortable, the unconscious contents. And the reason that they're exclusively in the unconscious is because they're taboo. They're difficult to address. But that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in that stuff. And I think that until more adults, especially adults that have power in this world to make decisions for other people, for example, teachers or politicians or doctors or anybody that holds some authority, until those people start looking at their shadow and accepting that they can't just hide behind their ego bolstered by letters behind their name. Until we start being more honest about a lot more of ourselves, then we're just going to be on the surface, and we're not going to be evolving, and we're not going to be experiencing deep satisfaction and collective well-being. And that's definitely what I want to contribute to. I want it for myself, and I want it for others. And so, yeah, I guess this is my first video with this new intention of continuing on self-development and shadow work and self-revealing, but also bringing in a new intention, a new old intention of clarifying and educating and sharing and facilitating and inspiring other people, those who might watch this and be interested in what I'm saying. Okay, I'm gonna end it here. Hopefully I'll learn how to do it in a shorter amount of time. Okay, thank you for watching.